Bryan Johnson, you radically changed your life when you embarked on this journey to reverse your age. And I'm very curious, you probably had some ideas and theories behind what was good when it came down to longevity, what was good for increasing lifespan potentially. Yeah. I'm curious, like, how has your mind changed over the last decade? Like, what are some things you've pivoted on?
Yeah. Nighttime boners matter.
Hey, after today's video, I put a link for 30% off your entire order through Thrive Market. So Thrive Market's an online membership-based grocery store. So no matter what it is that you're trying to find and you want just like a better for you option than what you would find at a typical grocery store, you can find it with Thrive Market. So you can sort by low carb, you can sort by sugar-free, you can sort by baking, and you can trust that they're gonna have foods that don't have preservatives, don't have the nastiness in them. They do a lot of research before they put a product on their shelves, so to speak. So that link down below, 30% off your entire grocery order. And then you also get a free $60 gift with any purchase. So 30% off and a $60 gift. So use that link down below in the top line of the description. You'll see it there, and that's gonna get you those savings. So check them out after this video. Okay, elaborate.
I mean, like, you know, as a kid, you start having boners, and then you have it during school, like when you wake up, when you're in class, it just happens and you can't stop it. You know, they have to like put your book in front of it when you walk. It's embarrassing. It's like, it's a thing. And then as you age, your boners kind of go away. Mm-hmm. And we were doing this therapy where we were doing electromagnetic shock therapy, where we're doing the sit-ups. So basically like the equivalent of 20,000 sit-ups. Okay. You know, in 30 minutes. And then we had a thing where I could sit on, and it was rebuilding strength on the muscles that control bladder and the ass. And so we were just kind of playing around with this thing. And I noticed that when I did that, I'd have more nighttime erections. Huh. And so I raised this with my team, like, what's happening here? And then we dug into the literature, and nighttime erections are a significant indicator of biological age, sexual function, and psychological health. It's not a random thing. It's not something that just doesn't matter. It's not something that, it's like actually a really important bioage marker. And so then we found a company in the UK that has a device. It's a cube squared. You put it on the penis or at the base of the shaft, and then as you go to bed, it measures your erections, both the duration and the number. So it'll give you a score of like, this is a 92% quality erection for, 27 minutes. And then there's age brackets. So when I measured my erections initially, I was 2 hours and 12 minutes. 132 minutes. And that put me right in the middle of my chronological age of 46. And then we said, okay, can you actually rejuvenate penis function, and specifically nighttime erections? And so we did two therapies that we found literature for. One is focused shockwave therapy, which is used for the whole body to rejuvenate joints. Like if you've torn an ACL and you're rebuilding, you can use it there or other parts of the body. It was proven to work with patients with ED. So even though I didn't have ED, we thought if it can fix ED, can it make something that works already better? Because I was scoring perfectly on erectile function. So we did that, and then we did Botox in the penis, which also increases blood flow, sensitivity, stuff like that. And 6 months later, I tested again, and my nighttime erections were 179 minutes. Whoa. Yep, so almost the length of the Titanic, the movie.
Your erection was the length of the Titanic.
Basically, yes. And so like this is something, erections are, like, they're in a category where you can't really talk about them publicly because it's in this weird zone of, is this appropriate? Is it uncomfortable? Yeah. Is it, it has all these characteristics of, will the person be damaged socially by talking about it? But then it's really important. So once I made this public, I had all my friends texting me of like, hey, I don't think I'm having any erections. Like, I'm not aware of them. Like when I wake up, I'm not erect. And so the majority of them were not sleeping very well. They were grinding in their companies and doing their thing. And so it was interesting to learn from the start that when I was endeavoring to end death, that one of the vectors we'd be looking at is nighttime boners. I never thought that path would lead me there, or that I'd be talking about it publicly.
Yeah, that's definitely, I did not expect you to go there with that one, but it makes complete sense. I mean, it's like as you get older, and it's probably a barometer for so many things that you don't realize.
Exactly right.
Your psychological, as we mentioned, of course, your hormonal health, of course, even relationships.
Yes.
I mean, if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. It's like there's all these things that you wouldn't think about that are happening unconsciously, when it comes down to erections. That's a really interesting one.
Exactly. And now my level 179 is now better than the average 18-year-old. So I started at age 46. I'm better than a teenager at this point with total time.
Where does it tend to peak when you look at this chart? Like what age does it tend to peak?
The data is 20 to 29 is the bracket.
Yeah.
And that average, excuse me, is I think 165 if I remember correctly. But I significantly beat that age category.
Yeah. Imagine there's like a seriously sharp drop off from like 45 to 49 kind of age. I'd imagine that's probably where people start to see it.
Yep.
Okay, what's something else you've changed your mind on or pivoted?
That this idea that if 1 is good, 2 must be better. And I think the truth is you want exactly the right amount, no less and no more.
Interesting. Give me an example of where you may have discovered this for like the first time.
I was doing liquid iodine, 125 mcgs a day, and for thyroid health. And we had just done a zinc taste test to see my zinc deficiency, and it was based upon whether I can taste the zinc. And so I was doing these 1 drops a day, and it tastes really sweet. And so I thought, I wonder if my body is saying, hey, it's sweet, therefore have 2 drops instead of 1. And so without my team's buy-in, I started doing 2 drops a day, so 250 mcgs instead of 125. I did it for about a month, and then I got some blood results back, and one of my levels came in outside of range. And the team was like, that's so weird. And I was like, I have a confession to make. I did 2 drops a day instead of 1. And they're like, oh, that makes sense. And so I found 2 lessons. One is I can't cheat because everything I do, I measured so much, everything I do ends up in data somewhere. So there's not a situation where I can say I'm doing a given thing and I don't do it because my entire life is digitally represented. And then 2 is even 1 extra drop a day put me outside ref range on this given marker. And so I've learned through so many examples that 2 is not better. So the same is true with exercise, with like you want to find the most precise thing possible and do that. Now, you may have some variability where like if there's a recommendation for everyone, you may have a bit more because your exact levels require more, but that's okay. It's still an exact number. But the idea that more is better is just not true.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. I mean, because you can, let's say, okay, I'm going to take, 2,000 milligrams per day of vitamin C prophylactically. And then you say, well, okay, that seems to be working, so I'm going to take 4,000.
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, now you've just taken far too much in the way of antioxidants that has a detrimental effect.
Yeah.
So it's like, in effect, taking double that might actually be worse off than just taking the original amount.
Yeah, exactly.
You definitely notice that with exercise. We were talking a little bit in another video about just finding that appropriate dose. And I've been really trying to find that minimum effective dose on almost everything that I do.
Yeah, that's the beauty. That's the thing you want to do.
Yeah. Okay, anything else you've pivoted on?
Yes, that we've been measuring my speed of aging with DNA methylation patterns for the past couple of years. I do it all the time. And we found that my speed of aging was responsive to certain therapies, but not lowering, increasing. So we found this in the first time I was doing a senolytic profile of doing dastatinib and quercetin. So dastatinib is a leukemia drug, and you do it 3 days in a row for 3 months, I think is the protocol. 50 milligrams of dastatinib, 500 milligrams of quercetin, and you pair the 2. And we found that when we did that protocol, my speed of aging went up. I think from like 0.7 to like 0.89 thereabouts. It was a pretty big jump. And then after I finished the therapy, it came back down.
Interesting.
And then we found also when I did HGH to try to rejuvenate my thymus, I did that for 100 days. Same thing, my speed of aging increased. After we discontinued the therapy, it came back down.
You say came back down, did it come back down to baseline or did it actually accelerate lower? I mean, do you think that perhaps you have to occasionally take 1 step forward to go, or 1 step back to go 2 steps forward?
Exactly. This is the question, my intuition was not that aging would be a game of whack-a-mole where you do one positive thing, but then it has this other effect which actually increases aging somewhere else. Now, it didn't come back down, it went back down to baseline. So there was no added benefit. But the fact that there's a trade-off in the therapies that not all things are just universally good, some things have these trade-offs, and that's been surprising to see. And because we have so much data on me, we get to see all these interplay consequences, and so that's been cool.
That's really wild. I mean, do you think it's perhaps, I'm assuming quercetin was added into the mix maybe for histamine rebound or probably some reason, maybe or not, but I would imagine that having it without quercetin probably would have been even more extreme hockey stick up in aging, generally speaking. But it's so interesting to look at. Do you find that there is anything as far as, let's say, exercise that has made a quick improvement or decrease in your overall age? And I know you're looking at so many different markers, it might be hard, right? Because I'm sure if you were to look at ROS immediately after exercise, or if you were to look at IL-6 immediately after exercise, you could look at someone and be like, oh my gosh, you just aged 15 years, but you obviously have a bunch of other metrics that you're cross-referencing with that. Is there anything that you've ever done that's been like, whoa, that was a crazy, crazy impact?
Yeah, just actually this week. My speed of aging using the DNA methylation patterns dropped to my lowest ever. It was 0.64, which is about as low as humanly possible in this time and place. I mean, it's like at the absolute bottom, and it's incredibly impressive, especially for a 46-year-old. Because you get older, then of course it's harder to get lower. And so it's 0.64, and there's only 2 therapies I did, which we can identify, which may have been the cause of the lowering. And that's a peptide regimen I did, and I did the follistatin gene therapy. But those are the 2 things. So now we're trying to figure out if we can tease out which one was responsible, because I think I did because I did an intramuscular follistatin, and the peptides was like 2 or 3 weeks before that. So we need to tease out the effect. But I mean, to get 0.64 is pretty crazy.
I mean, I don't want to go too far on a tangent, but the follistatin gene therapy, I have been extremely interested in doing. I've been thinking about going down to Cabo and doing that, along with some other things, but that's fascinating. Are you comfortable sharing what peptide regimen you were playing around with?
So first I did the CJC and the, I need to pull up my...
Ipamorelin?
Pamorelin, I did that, and I had such a negative side effect where I took it right before I went to bed. It wrecked my sleep.
Really?
Like just
so many people say they sleep so good with it.
It destroyed me. Like, and I had a hangover for like 2 days. And then I did it, today's Wednesday, I did it on Saturday morning. I did a third of the dose. So I did 0.05 ml. And in the morning before working out, and it still wrecked my sleep for a day. So I'm not doing that anymore.
Okay, so outside of peptides, clearly that made a difference. I'm not sure what your protocol going forward is going to be with that, but anything else that you've pivoted on?
I don't think I would have believed somebody that would have told me about sleep being as important as it's become to me. I think I would have said like, I hear you, sleep's important, but it's now the primary activity of my life. Like it is the most important thing I do every single day. Like nothing is more important to me than sleep.
Do you literally look forward to sleep?
I do. I can't wait. Yeah, especially because like I know when I was building my previous company, Braintree Venmo, it was grinding. Like you had to show up, and so long as you could make like reasonably good decisions, like it's okay. Like the decisions are not that complicated, right? You're doing like a known set of problems. But now I spend the majority of my time thinking about the future of intelligent existence. And there's no way when you're trying to think about those topics that you can be sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation annihilates your ability to just see past fog. And so I think if the advice I wish I would have gotten is, if you want to play intellectual games at the highest level, or want to try to play those games, sleep is an absolute necessity. If you're just hammering away on really basic problems in life, sleep deprive yourself and play that game if you want, but you're just never going to punch past yourself on your ability to think.
Yeah. Well, when you're looking at it from a perspective of 99% of people are probably playing in that sandbox, and if you can get yourself to that 1%, not only are you going to be making decisions that are probably more impactful, and candidly, you'll probably win at life a little bit better too. You're thinking clear. You're able to make decisions that maybe the rest of people can't. And not that it's all a competition, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're able to think outside the box and look at things differently, And I don't think people ever really experience what optimal sleep really feels
Exactly.
like. I mean, you know when you're a kid and you go to bed and you lay your head down and then you wake up in the morning and it was like someone just switched a switch with time. And it's like when you're an adult, that's just, it feels like that's gone, right? It's like, you're like, wow, remember? And you could be excited or amped. You could get in an argument with your sister, you know, your kid, your sibling, and lay your head down and still have no problem going to sleep. Like you could compartmentalize and whatever. And so what happens along the way, you know?
Yeah, so I'm there now. So I'm back to my kid state status where I lay down and I can just be out all night and wake up in the morning like, great, amazing. So it doesn't happen every night, but pretty close to every night.
What do you, and I'm very curious, I mean, for myself, because ever since my son was born 6.5 years ago, he was a really colicky baby. So he was up 6-7 times throughout the night for like the first 8 months of his life. And it started, it kickstarted something. I was like that until Tommy was born. Like I could lay my head down. I might wake up to pee once, but usually I'd wake up about 7 hours later, having to pee really bad, and that was the time to get up. And then it was after my son, it kickstarted a new routine in my brain where even now here he is, it's like my body still wakes up a lot, and it never broke out of that. So it's been I shouldn't say never, like I've done a lot of things and put a lot of things in place, but what does your actual sleep routine look like? What does your room look like? Do you do any white noise? I'm assuming it's blackout, but what does that look like?
Yeah, I had the same experience. So my first 2 babies were colicky.
Okay.
And so I understand if maybe our shared experience is when you lay your head down, you've got half your brain listening and then half the brain's trying to sleep, and you can never sleep because you're always, then you hear the cry and it's always like, do I get up to like address the cry, or do I play it tough and like they can cry it out? And with a colicky baby, you're just not quite sure what that line is. Like, do you soothe or do you like push through and let them do it? At least as new parents, you're just confused generally. And so I feel like that too had the same effect on me. It just wrecked me. And then my own behavior where I'd overeat at 7 p.m. because I was so stressed out from my startup and a challenging relationship with my partner and like all of life stresses. You put all those things together and sleep becomes an absolute nightmare. Like you dread it so badly because you know it's just going to be a cluster all night long. And so it's taken me several years to dig out of that. And I agree with you. It's like something like breaks and or changes and or like something happens internally, and it's very hard to switch back. And it took me a long time. Like it took me 2 years to perfect my sleep. And I had to go through all the iterations of like, can I eat this? Can I eat that? Do I eat this time or that time? Can I have like this kind of stress? Can I be in this kind of environment? And I've just like slowly serpentined my way to say like this formula now works. So like the things you're talking about, blacked out room, you know, I have a temperature controlled mattress, sleep. But the thing like really it comes back to if my resting heart rate is 47, I'm good. So it's just like, it's boiled down to that one marker. Now, like clearly I can be like stressed out and that's a variable that's gonna play. But generally speaking, if I hit that, then I'm gonna be good. So my entire life routine is around that number.
That's a good objective marker. And my resting heart rate is very similar. So it's a good, almost like I can kind of aim for something like that. And it can be frustrating because you find, okay, this worked. And then 2 nights later, it doesn't work. Right? So you're like, okay, it wasn't that per se. But definitely for me, I mean, simply, there is such a big difference between eating 2 hours before bed and 3 hours before bed too. Something about like for those just are just trying to say, okay, I'm still gonna have dinner with the family. You know, I'm not gonna early time restrict feed. The difference between if I go to bed at 9, stopping at 6 versus stopping at 7. And I mean stopping. Like some people will be like last big meal, maybe they'll munch a little. No, I mean it is like a hard line. If the hard line is at 6 compared to 7, there's no denying that the change is drastic. So there is something kind of magical about that 3 hour number.
And if you're playing for like 75% sleep, the things you and I talk about, they don't matter. But to edge out that remaining 25% of sleep quality, like these small details, they swing it 25%. And then it feels like 100% to us because we're so sensitive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you value it. I think the more that you start to, put stock in the fact that sleep is so important to you, you're probably going to squeeze more out of good sleep too, because you've realized I've got so much I mean, you've understanding the value of it, but you've also have emotional stock in it. So you're like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, this is going to work. And once you experience that extra 25% of sleep efficiency, you don't want to go back.
I know.
I don't want to go back to that.
I tell my teammates, if I have a bad night's sleep, again, we're dealing with a complicated thing the following day, I'll raise my hand and say, I don't think I can make this decision today. I'm not in the right state of mind. My emotions are not, like, if it's something important that needs to be decided, like, sure. But I think it's important to identify that, not getting ideal sleep leads to the same thing as alcohol intoxication. You're inebriated, like, you're legitimately challenged mentally. And so I definitely feel that way, and I don't want to make important life decisions when I'm in these bad emotional states.
And the 8 Sleep has been, I'm glad that you mentioned that. And this isn't a paid plug for them or anything, but I've noticed one of the biggest disturbances I have with sleep is, I've been with my wife for 20 years, but it is my wife in the bed with me, right? So we effectively had, and I talked about this before, we've had a sleep divorce where our relationship is better if I go sleep in another room.
Yeah.
And yes, we may hang out in bed, we may have sex, we may do our thing, right? But then I'm going to say, I love you, honey, and go into another room and sleep. Because
do you do that?
Yeah, not every single night, but I'd say, it depends. We live a couple different places. So the place that we're in right now is small, but when we're at another home where there's a guest bedroom, then I go sleep in the guest bedroom. And fun fact, gospel truth, I slept in a hotel last night because we have an old dog at the moment that we rescued, and he's got dementia. So he'll bark at the wall randomly throughout the night. So he'll
Poor guy.
And he's this cute old guy, he's 18 years old. But I'm like, Amber, like, you sleep through it, I don't. I wake up and then I'm dead in the water. So I'm gonna go get a hotel tonight. But then, although I slept better than I probably would have at home, being in a new environment does something different too. It's like I wake up and check my surroundings and I'm like, I'm not home. Like, where am I? So the sleep quality isn't amazing.
And the duvet is never thick enough. It always feels like such a light sheet. And
Do you use a weighted blanket or anything?
I have a duvet, so I did, and I loved it. Mm-hmm. But then I stopped because then when I traveled, the difference between the weighted blanket and what the hotel offered was so dramatic that I would just be a terrible sleeper in the hotel. Yeah. So I actually prefer a weighted blanket, but I just think I can't travel with it. It's too much.
You're gonna hit oversized real quick. What is your room temperature when you sleep?
So I don't include any temperature control in the house. Okay. So it's all seasonal, and so it just depends on the season. But my bed in the winter is at 73 for REM and 71 for deep, something like that. Okay. And then in the summer, I think it's 67 for REM and 65 for deep, something like that.
Okay. Anything else you've changed your mind on?
Yeah, I got into this experiment with this imagination that could we possibly dare to set our sights on death? If Magellan said in the 1500s that he thought he and his crew could sail around the world, was that crazy or was it possible? Turned out possible. And then if you take, in the 60s, can we go to the moon? Crazy or possible? And so if you pose these questions in time and place, I opened saying, is it our time and place to actually set our sights on conquering death? And now 3 years into it, I think it is the right time for us to proclaim we're after death, that we actually can meaningfully change the way we think about aging, deterioration, rejuvenation, and life extension. And it doesn't mean that I'm saying I think we've solved immortality. It means that I think that what we have been doing of the inevitability of decay and death is a different game than we've ever played before. And I think it should become the singular game as a species, individually, collectively, for the planet, and for AI. Like, this is the game. So I'd say I didn't know where I would be at. 3 years in, I'm here. Like, I think I'm sold. This is it.
Yeah. I mean, if there is a time where there is an inflection point and sort of a hockey stick in the ability to look at this stuff, it is now. I mean, it is now. And it's like, where do we put resources? Where do we put time? And I'm with you. I don't think that we're going to be immortal. I don't think, I think we probably are designed to die at some point, but how long can that be prolonged with a good quality of life? I think it's something that perhaps people were afraid to look at, right? It's like people say they're afraid of death. I think people are afraid of sometimes trying to conquer it because it sounds so wrong. Yeah. we're programmed to die, we're supposed to die. Okay, that doesn't mean that we don't try to extend life.
Yeah.
Like, your Toyota Camry is eventually going to break down. Doesn't mean you don't try to squeeze 400,000 miles out of it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, I don't know, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of skin that cat, but
Yeah.
I'm with you. Well, Bryan, where can everyone find you, man?
I'm blueprint.bryanjohnson.com.
Perfect. Easy enough. Thanks, man.
Yep.